Translator, Dark Angel, Edikarisu. What is the meaning of this? A few Imperial guards arrived at an unhurried pace, yet the instant their eyes caught the headless corpse sprawled upon the ground, their complexions changed at once. They were tasked with keeping order in this place, and now that a life had been taken, it would be no easy matter for them to make their report. Sirs, this man committed murder before all eyes. We beseech you, sirs, to act and seize him. The four guardian deities all raised their hands and pointed straight at Ling Han. When the Imperial guards saw Ling Han, their faces could not help but twitch. Naturally, they knew who Ling Han was. Their superiors had issued repeated commands. Under no circumstances were they to come into conflict with this person. Yet this brat truly made people worry. How could he simply kill in public? Ling Han gave a cold snort and said, "First, there is something I must correct. This is not the Imperial City. Among martial artists, in the wilderness, it is only natural that conflicts arise. Just now, I had a minor dispute with that idiot, but in the end, that idiot was truly too weak. With a single blow, he was finished." Everyone stared, blank and stunned. Indeed, this was not the Imperial City. It was 700 miles away from it. It was only because everyone here had come from the Imperial City, and because Imperial guards were even stationed here to maintain order, that people still carried the mindset that they remained within the Imperial City. Brawls and bloodshed in the wild were, in truth, far too common. The number of people in Rain Country who died because of such things each year was beyond counting. If every case were pursued, then Rain Country would likely be finished, because every party was more or less entangled in such battles. However, though that logic held, why did it sound somewhat strange? Do not create any further trouble, otherwise we will place you under arrest. If anyone dares resist, he will be killed without exception. One of the Imperial guards finally decided that he would not pass judgment on Ling Han's life until Ling Han was already dead. Agreed. Ling Han lifted a hand and said, he had already killed the person he wanted to kill, and what followed would be the four guardian deities going mad. He had no intention of making a move at all. The four guardian deities were so furious they could have spat blood. Was this not aimed at them? Let's go. We'll enter the mystery realm. Everything will be discussed after my lord returns, the wolf guardian deity said in a low voice. When my lord returns this time, he will be bringing with him supreme authority. Not even if the Rain Emperor appeared would he be able to save this brat. The tiger guardian deity nodded as well. Enter the mystery realm. The elephant guardian deity ground out through clenched teeth. They had once again failed to protect Feng Luo. Who knew whether Feng Yan would vent his fury on them when he returned? Merely thinking of him was enough to freeze their hearts within their chests. The four guardian deities entered the mystery realm one after in an instant, vanished from sight. Only now did Qi Yongye and the others release sighs of relief. They discovered there was a sheen of cold sweat upon their foreheads, and they could feel the chill in their bodies. Brother Ling, you are truly too bold, Baili Tengyun said, fear still lingering in his heart. He's nothing but a stinking bug. If I've crushed him to death, then I've crushed him to death, Ling Han said, utterly unconcerned. Though Feng Luo is not one to be feared, but Feng Yan, Qi Yongye had only just begun. Who did not know that Feng Yan was now extremely influential? Within the academy, he could practically do anything. Merely thinking of forming a deadly enmity with Feng Yan was enough to frighten anyone. "I, little Ye Ye!" Ling Han suddenly waved towards someone behind them. Qi Yongye and the others all turned around and saw a young man with only one arm. He stood alone with a single saber, yet it was as if he were the master of mountains and rivers, a supreme aura circulating about him. Before him, anyone would seem exceedingly insignificant. Can Ye? But little Ye Ye? Everyone's expressions became a touch strange. Could it be that between these two men there was some ambiguous relationship that could not be revealed? Can Yi walked over, showing neither objection nor discomfort at the way Ling Han addressed him. In his heart and spirit, only the saber existed. So what if the whole world slandered him or spoke ill of him? One slash from him and everything would be silenced. All right, since everyone in our group is here, let's go, Ling Han said with a smile. When had Ken Yi become one of their group? Qi Yongye and the others were all astonished, yet they said nothing more. Instead, they kept close behind Ling Han and headed toward the teleportation door. As for the matter of Feng Yan, it was best left to be discussed later. Shoo, shoo. They passed through one after another. Ling Han carried Hu Nu, and the instant he stepped into the vortex, he felt as if even his soul were about to be torn apart. Time itself seemed to lose all meaning, forever congealing in that single moment. He had barely completed that thought when suddenly he appeared within an unfamiliar world. Green grass spread out like a mattress, like an endless ocean. When a breeze swept past, the grass swayed lightly, as if gentle waves had rolled through. There was an indescribable beauty to this place. However, aside from Hu Nu and his arms, everything around him was completely empty. There was not even a ghost in sight. Random teleportation. Ling Han frowned. He had asked many questions, yet this was the one thing he had not asked about. In the end, it was an absolute waste for them to have gathered beforehand. There was no point to it at all. Thankfully, Hu Nu had been clinging to him the entire time. Otherwise, who knew where this little girl would have been sent? Without him there to restrain her, who knew what kind of trouble she would stir up, especially with her ferocious nature? Wah! Hu Nu leaped down from Ling Han. Using all four limbs, she began to race about wildly. She had grown up in the forest since she was a child, and this sort of world was where she truly belonged. Ling Han walked ahead, while Hu Nu dashed around in delight. One moment she would be before him, the next she would be behind him. Sometimes she would be to his left, other times to his right. Even Ling Han was infected by her happy mood, and he could not help but smile. Danger! His senses suddenly flared, and he hurriedly sprang toward Hu Nu. Shoo! A small white creature suddenly hopped out. It was a rabbit. It had been chewing on the grass, but Hu Nu's mad running had frightened it out, making Ling Han think it was an enemy. He smiled and halted. Hu Nu, on the other hand, brightened and immediately tried to catch it. She chased after the rabbit with her mouth opened wide, repeatedly trying to bite it. Clearly, Hu Nu did not find the rabbit cute at all. She only regarded it as prey. Shoo! The rabbit fled swiftly, but Hu Nu was not slow either. She pursued it quickly. Ling Han's shout failed to stop her, so he could only follow close at her heels. After a while, the rabbit scrambled into the grass, and there was no trace of it left. It seemed to have fled into a rabbit hole. Hu Nu immediately began to dig at the ground with both hands, determined to capture this rabbit at all costs. Forget it. Though that little guy is very fat, with your appetite, it's not even enough to be an appetizer. Ling Han reached down and picked Hu Nu up. The little girl was extremely displeased, her mouth puffing into a pout to show her annoyance. Shoo! 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 At this moment, a large number of rabbits sprang out of the rabbit hole. However, these rabbits were not cute at all. They were as large as dogs, with bright red eyes, and they exuded a bloodthirsty aura. Damn! Ling Han cursed inwardly, and could not help but grow cautious. That was because these rabbits were actually an element gathering tier, and there were even two among them who were in gushing spring tier. 30, 40, 50. Their numbers increased more and more. Finally, a giant rabbit about the size of a human being hopped out, and this last rabbit emanated an aura that could only belong to someone in the late stage of gushing spring tier. Some people would say they'd poked the hornet's nest, but now it had become the rabbit's nest. One Ling Han's gaze swept across them, calculations already forming in his mind. 1 in the late stage of gushing spring tier, 7 in the middle stage of gushing spring tier, 21 in the early stage of gushing spring tier, and as many as 100 rabbits in element gathering tier. He immediately understood there was no way to win, and hurriedly scooped Hu Nu up and fled. Since there was no way to win, then he would flee. That was the simplest path out. Dark Angel review. There was no path left but to make a swift retreat. If there were fewer than 10 early-stage gushing spring tier among them, Ling Han could still just barely find a way to grapple and contend. But that there were close to 20 here, more than enough to drown him alive. What more when several were mid-stage, and one was even late-stage gushing spring tier? If Ling Han truly charged straight in, that would not be called fighting. That would be called delivering himself to death. He immediately broke into a run. and those rabbits behind him refused to let him go, chasing without the slightest intent to give up. Earlier, it had been Who Knew chasing that little rabbit. Now their roles were reversed. Now it was they who were fleeing like mad. Who Knew was not anxious in the least. She kept smacking Ling Han's shoulder and shouting, "Run faster! Run faster!" This little girl. How could Ling Han spare even a breath to lecture her? He could only pour every shred of strength into fleeing for their lives. Yet rabbit demons were famed for their speed to begin with. And now there was even an old rabbit monster in the late period of gushing spring tear. Thus, in only a few moments, they had closed right up behind Ling Han, mouths opening as they prepared to bite. As the saying goes, once driven into desperate straits, even rabbits will bite. The two front teeth of that old rabbit demon were like hoes, long and sharp, glinting with a cold, killing light. Ling Han instantly transformed the blood-sucking origin gold into a shield and met the bite head-on. A fierce shockwave slammed into him, leaving him so wretched he nearly spat blood on the spot. And with that brief pause, the mass of rabbit demons behind had surged even closer. With things going like this, there was no way he could escape. Ling Han let out a sigh, drew out a swift cloud talisman, and slapped it onto his body. Wang, this plain-looking talisman paper suddenly blazed with brilliant radiance, and an indescribable force poured into his body. Shoo, he once more sprinted forward with all he had, and his speed instantly soared tenfold. Shh! The rabbit demons squealed in furious rage, yet Ling Han was pulling farther and farther away. At last, he left them completely behind, and there was no trace of him remaining within their sight. Once a spiritual talisman was activated, there was no halting its effect. Ling Han did not wish to waste it, so he kept running forward, and only when the swift cloud talisman's power had been utterly spent did he finally stop. He took out an alchemical pill and swallowed it down to treat the internal injuries he had suffered when he had clashed head-on with that old rabbit demon just now. The indestructible heaven scroll circulated through him, and his injuries were healing at a rate visible to the naked eye. So long as it's not a major injury to my nerves or bones, I can recover within the time it takes to drink a cup of hot tea. Ling Han smiled. And even if I suffered grievous injuries, I still have a drop of indestructible true fluid. Fun, fun, Who Knew chirped happily. Little girl, just to let you have a bit of fun for that short while, I actually used up a swift cloud talisman. Ling Han shook his head, patted Who Knew's head, and said, "This is a very dangerous place. New, be good and don't run around anymore. New is a good New, will be good." Who Knew nodded earnestly, her expression extremely serious. Ling Han laughed. Just now, if Who Knew had not gone to chase after that little rabbit, would they still have disturbed those demonic beasts when they passed by the rabbit demon's lair? The answer was, who knows? That was because the rabbits lived underground and were extremely sensitive to tremors above. Moreover, those red-eyed rabbits were clearly ferocious. Perhaps even if they had not been disturbed, they would still have gone berserk. Now, where should we go? He drew out the map. The entire Devil Sky Mystery Realm was vast, rumored to be comparable to a country in size. This map only marked the outermost region, roughly 1/10 of the whole Mystery Realm, which also meant the 9 nations of the desolate north had only managed to reach this point, while the lands beyond were far too dangerous, with no way to access them. Yet it was also possible that some great faction had already pushed into deeper regions, but to keep the benefits for themselves, had never shared that information with anyone else. This was entirely possible, because the deeper one went into the mystery realm, the higher the grade of cultivation and martial techniques would need to be. So why should they share it with others? Why not leave it for themselves alone to exploit? However, the Devil Sky Mystery Realm rarely opened, once in dozens of years at least, or a few hundred years at most. This was not something easily arranged. There were factions that had been supremely influential the last time it opened, yet by the next opening they might have declined to unimaginable levels. My current location, the outermost zone is a plain named the Grassy Plains. If I head toward the center, there will be a ring-shaped mountain, and it has 4 ravines through which one can enter. At the end of each ravine, there is a center hall. If I want to reach the deeper areas of the Devil Sky Mystery Realm, I must pass through the 4 ravines, unless I can scale this ring-shaped mountain. But it is said this mountain is 1,000 feet tall and extremely steep, so there is no way to climb it. Then I should find a ravine first. I am very curious about the depths of this mystery realm. What could be concealed inside? Ling Han lifted his gaze into the distance, and indeed, he could see a dark shadow along the horizon. That would be the ring-shaped mountain, so tall it looked as if it were connected to the heavens. Let's go. Hunyu put on the airs of an adult, tugged Ling Han's hand, and walked forward. They set off toward the ring-shaped mountain. Ling Han soon discovered that there was no night here. The sky remained bright, yet there was no sun. This was not a complete world. Rather, it had been carved out from the real world by an almighty being using supreme methods. So naturally, it was not the same as the real world. This was his first time entering a mystery realm, and he could not help but feel astonished. Everything was fresh and novel to him. After traveling for about half a day, the little girl began crying out from hunger. Ling Han also felt a bit hungry. Fortunately, he had a spatial ring and had long since prepared a supply of food stored within. And to satisfy Hunyu's monstrous appetite, he had also prepared demonic beast meat. It was still meat, but it contained 10 times the energy one would gain from ordinary meat. The higher the grade of the demonic beast, the more energy and power were contained in its blood and bones. The little girl's appetite was enormous because her body required a colossal amount of energy, but there were also times when she had eaten too much, such as when she had eaten the root of that divine medicine. It had directly turned Hunyu into an egg. After they ate, they traveled a while longer before stopping to rest. They set up a tent on the grass, and after sleeping enough, they continued once again. There would also be people from the 9 nations gathered here, and the highest cultivation level permitted to enter was spiritual ocean tier. Thus, they had to ensure they remained in peak condition at all times. Otherwise, if they were killed off, who would they cry their grievances to? The random teleportation is truly detestable. Ling Han sighed. Otherwise, he would have Guang Yuan by his side and could also command Kanye, so he would not need to be so cautious as he was now. Though they could not see any shift from day to night here, Ling Han still kept track of time within his heart. After about 3 days, they could finally see the true form of the ring-shaped mountain ahead, rather than the black lump they had been watching for the past few days. By now, there were also gradually more trees, and it was no longer only grass dominating the surroundings. These trees were all purple, scattered across a green plain that stretched as far as the eye could see, forming a unique scenery. "Stand right there!" A voice suddenly rang out from atop a tree. Ling Han raised his head and saw a person crouched on the branch. That person kept waving a hand at him, signaling him to stop advancing. Ling Han's eyes were sharp enough to see that the brand on the other's arm was the same as his. "Why?" Ling Han asked. That man looked somewhat defiant, yet he feared even more that Ling Han would ruin things, so he could only say, "We are preparing to kill a fire-eyed bull, and this is the encirclement zone we have set. That fire-eyed bull is about to be lured over, and if you enter, you may ruin our plans."